Nelson. Gee.
So I thought this was the meeting where you take a nap or go play golf or something. So there's like 1,000 of y'all in here. I'm an alcoholic. My name's Nelson Griffin. My sobriety date is March 27, 2000. My home group is the 10th Step Promises Men's Group in Lexington, Kentucky. I've lived there for about 3 years now. We meet Wednesday nights at 6 o'clock and then go eat dinner. We're in downtown Lexington. And now you just get on your phone and look stuff up on an app. Things have changed from like paper meeting schedules and calling intergroups and stuff. So we're real easy to find and we'd love to have you. But I am from Durham, and North Carolina is my home. And before I came, I went down to the beach. My folks have a place at Holden Beach, and I've been going there since the summer of 1981. And when you drive out of Kentucky, at least the way they tell you on the phone, is you go through Asheville and then you kind of work your way around Charlotte. As soon as I hit Union County and I saw all those longleaf pine trees, I thought, oh man, I can breathe, I'm home. I don't have to worry about shoveling snow. We shovel snow in Kentucky. It's quite an odd deal, but anyway, this really does kind of feel like a homecoming. I'm from North Carolina, and I got sober here, and I love North Carolina AA, and it has been a real treat to be hosted. It's been fantastic. Chuck's been a great host. The committee, thank you so much. Everything has been just taken care of, and I feel real comfortable, and it's just been incredible. And I've gotten to spend a lot of time with Roy, and we've talked AA history specifically in North Carolina, and our roots run deep, and we have a lot of old timers here to be really grateful for. I love that we still wear suits and ties, and we clean up our language, and we respect the program. I think that's a big deal, I'm not going to sit around and talk about what used to be, because frankly, I'm not that old, and I'm certainly not an old timer. But and my sponsor's name is Tom Hunt. He is somewhere between Alpharetta, Georgia, and Wheaton, Illinois. I don't know where his permanent residence is right now. He's in the process of moving, but he's been my sponsor since 2010, and one of the things when he started sponsoring me, I was 10 years sober, and he said, I am so grateful that I don't have to teach you AA etiquette or any of that, like AA 101. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, well, I sponsor some guys that have a little bit of time, and they don't know how to sit through a meeting, and they don't know that you don't get up and get coffee, and you don't crosstalk or interrupt, and you're not on your cell phone, and you greet people, and you don't just walk in and sit in the back. And he's like, you actually know how to behave in AA. And I was, I'm so grateful for North Carolina AA and the people that raised me. I wouldn't be here without y'all, so thank you. It was also a real privilege this morning. My mother chaired the Al-Anon meeting, and I got to sit in between my father and my sister. And I'll talk about it in a minute, but alcoholism in our family is generational. And they all said, we went in the lobby after the meeting this morning, they all said, there's no place we'd rather be than here. What a gift, what a blessing. It was not that way 22 years ago. It was not. And it was not that way in our family at times. And I'm so grateful. Thank you. Thank you for my family. Thank you for supporting me. I love y'all. I'm so grateful. They're all sitting right over there, and and we support each other. We all go through stuff, and we support each other. My family has had my back in this deal from day one. And I know that's not everybody's story. In fact, that was one of the things that was hard for me. I felt different. I had this loving, supporting family, and I still had to come to Alcoholics Anonymous. Golly, what kid grows up thinking, well, I can't wait for that AA thing one day? I've been working in schools for the last 15 years, and I kind of get it now. There's some kids you work with, and you go, boy, I hope I'm around, and I'll sit right next to you and get you a cup of coffee, Hang in there. It's a wild ride, But anyway, I'll just start from the beginning. You know, I was born over in Durham, at Durham County Hospital, January 26, 1981, and you know, I have a wonderful mother and father. You know, I didn't want for anything. My parents are incredibly hardworking. They're very giving. All of their parents are incredibly loving, hardworking, giving people. And, you know, I'm really not by nature. I'm a taker, you know. And I always felt, you know, really, really bad about that when I was drinking, because I came from such a legacy of love and service. And it did nothing for me. It was like, what if you got something I want, I'm gonna get it one way or another, you know. And I was just a taker. It's just how I came into the world. I wish I knew differently, but you know, on my dad's side, he's the fourth of 9 children, and so they're just, you know, there's just a ton of them. It's like having a litter of dogs or whatever. I mean, there's just a bunch of kids. And so I think my dad, in his mind, probably really wanted our family to be, you know, very orderly and calm, because he did not grow up with that. You know, he grew up with the kids were raising kids, and there was people always at the house, and they didn't eat. They just ate dinner, I guess, when food was ready. I mean, it was kind of wild, you know. And and there were 9 kids, and 7 were boys. So I mean, it was wild. My mother's from the Outer Banks, and her parents owned a hotel there, and you know, it's cool. My grandmother got sober on June the 6th, 1971, in Alcoholics Anonymous. And, you know, my mom's brother died from this disease about 9 months before I got sober. And it definitely, there's a long family history there of alcoholism. But, you know, I have my grandmother's white chip, and I have her 24-year coin that she had. She died just shy of 25 years sober. And I firmly believe, she died in 96. I was a real jerk at her funeral, especially to my mother. I was 15 years old, and I behaved very inappropriately. And when I got sober, I prayed to my grandmother like she was a saint, and I know that she was with me. And I still talk to her. You know, that's my own spiritual belief. I'm not putting that on anyone else, but I still talk to my grandmother. She's a part of me. She's a part of my life. I have a lot of her AA coins. I have a lot of her literature. I have her big book and her 12 and 12. So I came into this world, though, and, you know, life was good. Everything's wonderful. And I always think life was pretty good until I went to kindergarten. You'll hear, I hope I talk about, I've worked in schools for 15 years. I hated school. Absolutely hated school. I didn't like the other kids. I didn't like the teacher, source of authority. I don't like authority. I do not like rules. Never have. Have no use for them. They don't apply to me. If everybody would just get out of my way and let Nelson do what he wants to do, we'd be just fine in this world. So I just didn't like it. I remember distinctly we had to hold hands to walk to the cafeteria. And I don't know why, you know, these lovely people that design our schools, the kindergarten wing was like on the opposite end from the cafeteria. So you got the youngest group of kids having to walk the furthest. Anyway, I'll write that down later. But we had to hold hands, and I remember, like, I'm not holding anybody's hand. I'm not a hand holder, you know. To this day, I really don't like holding hands, just to be honest. It feels like someone's trying to control me, you know. I just don't like holding hands. I'm not wired right. Y'all already know that, but, you know. And I didn't like school, and I guess one of the blessings and curses is I was pretty successful at it. I'm probably of just above average intelligence, but I have a killer memory, which is really good for resentments. I mean, I can remember things forever, you know. It makes that whole 4th and 5th and 6th and 7th step process quite interesting, really. But, you know, so I started collecting resentments as soon as I hit kindergarten. And but I was good at school except for conduct or whatever. I always got talks during independent work time. I like to talk. I'm very social. I'm extremely extroverted. it was actually really helpful to me. All these people kept coming up and talking to me before this, and I'm like, oh, this is great. Like, I'm an extrovert, so it doesn't bother me. But anyway, I finally, I needed a drink. And I remember in the 5th grade, they finally sent me to the principal's office. And the principal's name was Miss Edelman at Pearsontown Elementary School. And they sent me in there. I remember waiting and nervous, probably about as nervous as I was before I got up here to talk to y'all. And I got in there and she did one of these, when they do that, and then sent me back to class. And I remember thinking, I don't care what this woman thinks of me. In fact, I don't care what anybody thinks of me. And when I moved up to middle school and in the 6th grade, I got suspended before I ever took a drink for fighting. Now you can look, I'm not a big guy, I'm not much of a fighter, way much more of a talker. I like to start a fight and walk away from it. But I did get suspended for fighting. And so that summer in June, I went to an 8th grade party. My mother was out of town, so I convinced my dad to drop me off at this party, and I drank 2 warm Colt 45s in June out of the back of this guy's trunk. And I did not like the taste, but I sure did like the effect. And I didn't get drunk, but I was like, all right, I can do this, Now, let me step back to something I forgot that I think is really important. I wish I could recall, and maybe y'all can recall, I don't know, but at some point at age 10 or 11, my parents sat me down and talked to me about alcoholism. I don't know I can't remember what they said. I don't remember what I was wearing or anything, but or the moment, but I knew that there was something called alcoholism that I needed to be aware of, and that I shouldn't really drink. But, at 12 years old, they said that in that DARE class. Remember DARE? We had to suffer through that. I was always so curious, like, wait, this stuff does what? Oh, interesting. Huh. So DARE did not work for me, sorry. But anyway, I'm really grateful for that moment. That helped me later on. But what I realized is 2 16-ounce beers is not going to get me drunk. So I started stealing beer out of the refrigerator and holding it in my closet. And sometime that summer in July, and nobody said anything, so I thought I'd gotten away with it. And I sat in my room and I drank like 8 or 9 beers by myself, and I got drunk. And it felt magical. It felt amazing. It was this immense relief. And I remember like going up to the pool and telling, some of my buddies, and like, we got to figure out a way to do this, Like, y'all have got to have this experience. This is where it's at. And I started running with some guys that we would stay at this one guy's house, and we would steal a 5th of liquor. And they would take a few pulls off it, and I would take a few, chugs, and then they would slowly start passing out, and it'd be me by myself drinking. And that was fine. Great drinking buddies there, right? Plenty to go around. But it was very clear that my drinking was different. As far as I know, none of them have made it to these rooms, those guys I ran with, Maybe they are, and I don't know it. I don't know everybody that's sober. But I just remember I loved that feeling. So I started doing it anytime I could, And then I went away to boarding school on my choice. And, I had gotten suspended from school again. I'd gotten kicked out of church camp. I got caught with a girl at like 2 in the morning. I always had a problem with that, too. And, I went away to boarding school thinking, like, if I just get away from, all of my friends, then I'll be okay. I'll be better. And I got up to this boarding school, and you know how we are. It's like I'm up there 2 weeks, and I find all the people that like to do the things that I like to do, and I started drinking again when I could, And I came back to Durham, and I'm 16, and I got a driver's license, and then I was really dangerous because I really had unlimited access to alcohol. And I had no problem going into bad neighborhoods in Durham and getting someone to buy it. Or I worked at this restaurant with people that were old enough and they would buy it. And I really, by 16, became a daily drinker. And I just kind of resigned myself. I can remember when I was 17, I can remember being at my friend's house. I was like a junior in high school. And I don't know, we were all drinking and we ran out. And I started to panic. Oh my God, we're out of booze. And I just walked out of the house. And my friend opened the door. He goes, "Where are you going?" I was like, "To get more alcohol." And he goes, "But we're all drunk." And I was like, So what? And the words just came out of my mouth, I'm an alcoholic, I need more. Now I can't, if you had strapped me to a lie detector test, I had no clue what I was saying. Absolutely no clue. I didn't know what an alcoholic was at 17. I had no clue, except for my uncle. You know, my mom's brother would show up every once in a while and need money. And you know, I'd hate when he would call. It was so awkward to talk to him on the phone as a kid. Remember the phones that were attached to the cords and the wall and stuff? I'd go hide. I didn't want to talk to my uncle. You know, there was something strange about him, and I didn't know what it was. I had no clue, you know, and he was always needing money. He was always hard up. He was always having a hard time. And when he would come, my parents would always get in a fight. So I remember he showed up at Christmas one year, and I thought, oh, God, here we go, you know. And I mean, you know, now I have total compassion. I was sitting in a meeting in Lexington last summer, and this guy walked in. He looked like the spitting image of my uncle. And he sat there and he shared, and he said, I can get 6 months, but after 6 months, that itch comes, and I can't do anything about it, and I'm never going to make it. And I had so much compassion for that man. And I walked out of there, and I was doing my nightly journaling, and I thought, oh my God, it's like seeing what could have been like my uncle. I have so much compassion for what that man went through. You know, he drank until he was 55, and his body shut down. I mean, that's what's going to happen. So I resigned that to be my fate. I mean, why not? I'm just carrying on the old family tradition, you know, I'm not any different. Somehow I finished high school. I think they just wanted me out of Durham Public Schools. But good alcoholic, I was the student body president. As far as I know, I was the first one that didn't get to speak at graduation because they had no clue what I would say. So they were like, we ain't giving you a microphone, you know? So I got up there and I had to introduce the school board. So I remember mispronouncing their names, you know, because I'll show you. You get me, I'm going to get you back. I had no problem with revenge here, you know. And I just worked in a restaurant, and I played in a band, and I drank. And that's what I did. And I moved out of my parents' house, and my drinking, I could drink like I wanted. And I got to the point where none of my friends would drink with me anymore. And I got to the point where, you know, I like to drink beer and whiskey together. I never understood, what is that, what is it, beer before liquor, never sicker? That's a non-alcoholic saying. No alcoholic came up with that. What a Mickey Mouse saying, right? Like, you're missing all the fun if you don't, you know, take a shot of whiskey and chase it with a beer. I mean, heck, a beer's only about 4 swallows, really, if you're drinking it properly. You know, so, I mean, and my body was just built for that. I mean, I can't, you know. I think one thing I don't hear a lot about in AA, I don't hear a lot about the allergy. Let me tell you what, when I walked in and I read the doctor's opinion, I went, oh my God, I got to get sober, I'm going to die. That doctor's opinion rang my bell. The first time I drank alcohol, I remember going, oh, I can breathe. When I started drinking every day at 16, I would wait for that drink, and that first, you know, that warm feeling, it goes down, it gets right at the top of your gut, and then it just, I mean, it's like you could breathe, you know. Alcohol didn't make things better for me, but it sure made me care a lot less, you know. It sure made me worry less about you, and more importantly, it made me worry less about me. I felt so trapped all the time and so consumed with self. When I'm drunk, maybe it's about me, but I don't care. I begin to lose, you know, I just, you know, I loved it. I didn't particularly like the taste, but it didn't bother me. It was a means to an end. I didn't mind throwing up, you know. I think I only threw up the night of drinking twice. I was one of those drinkers, I would just drink and drink and drink, and then wherever I was and my body shut down, there I am, you know. I got to the point no one would let me stay at their house because you knew somebody was going to be cleaning up some urine. And that was embarrassing. I did everything to try to stop that. I could not figure that recipe out. You know, I switched to wine, beer only, liquor only, all kinds of stuff. I wake up in a wet bed, it didn't matter, you know. But vomiting the next morning, I mean, I would just throw up and keep moving, you know. I mean, it's consequences of my actions. You know, I just whatever. So really what happened is I was, I worked at this restaurant and I'm drinking, and I had gotten pneumonia really bad. I tried to quit drinking. That's the other thing. I tried to quit, and I couldn't quit. I could make it like a week. I tried the O'Doul's experiment. Let me tell you what, you drink a case of O'Doul's, all you are is really angry and you've used the bathroom a bunch. I mean, it did not work for me. But, I had pneumonia real bad, and my mom had to come get me out of the place I was living and take me to an urgent care to get me dried out. And it was bad. I stayed sober a week and started drinking again. And on March the 25th, 2000, I got up, hungover. I was supposed to be at work at 10. I worked in a restaurant. I was there after 10 at some point. We opened at 11, and I'd gotten drunk the night before because we got paid Friday at 2, which was always dangerous. I like to go to this Mexican restaurant in Durham that never carded, and I would drink pina coladas, tequila, and then go home and finish whatever beer was in the refrigerator. And I got off work that day and sat at the bar where I worked and, drank 15, 16 beers, went home, decided I should eat something. Had a little sandwich, drove to Chapel Hill, went to a party. There was a keg there. I don't really remember how much I drank, but someone tried to take my keys, so I decided I better make an exit. I was in a blackout, and I ran off the road on the way home in Durham. I called my sister, who had her learner's permit at the time, to come pick me up. She did, and through a series of events, the Durham Police Department located me at my mom and dad's house and arrested me in my living room in front of my mom and dad. They threatened to take my sister, who was right before her 16th birthday downtown, and somehow that didn't happen. I said, just give me an extra charge. So they locked me up in the Durham County Jail. My dad graciously bailed me out the next morning, and I went home and I flopped out and passed out, and I came to, and my roommate wanted to know where my truck was, and I kind of told him what had happened, and he said, well, there's a case of beer in the fridge. And so I crawled down and I started trying to nurse that case of beer. And I drank it for, 5 or 6 hours, just nursing beer after beer after beer. And sometime that evening I passed out, and I came to the next morning and looked in the mirror. And I don't know why I wanted things to be different, but I did. Really, I just wanted my driver's license back. I felt trapped again. I don't like feeling trapped. I walk in a room and the first thing I do is look for the exit. That's how I'm wired. I always want to know what my exit strategy is. I felt trapped. And I went to work and I remarked to one of the guys that I thought I wasn't going to drink. And he looked at me and goes, you're going to drink? You drink every day. By that point, my nickname was Critter. Everybody just called me Critter. Everywhere I went, I was Critter. I worked with this guy and I was a couple years sober, and when I left that job, he said, what's your real name anyway? Everybody just called me Critter. All right, and I took it on, right, as this persona, right? Like I'm some kind of stage character. But I didn't drink for 30 days, and I sweated it out, and it was awful. And my dad said he got me a lawyer, and the lawyer said I need to go to an outpatient treatment program so that when I go in front of the judge, I can tell him I'm doing something. And I thought, if that's what I got to do to get my license back, I'm in. So I did I did that, and I completed that program. I don't remember a whole lot, except that there were some. Now, I was 19 years old when I got sober. And I remember there were old people in there. And that was, to me, anybody over 30, And those old people in that outpatient, they looked at me and they were like, my God, you're in bad shape. And I was like, I'm only 19 years old, but I really didn't think I'd see 21, I just didn't. And I wasn't going to go to AA. And there's a series of events. I ended up at my first meeting in Chapel Hill, 6 months dry. And I'll just tell you, I hated AA. Some people walk into AA and think it's great. I had zero aspiration to join Alcoholics Anonymous. That was not in my plan for life. It's boring here. You got to sit still. If you're a newcomer, really, you only speak when spoken to. People want you to share your feelings. Ugh. I got one feeling. It's called anger. Get over it. It seemed like a lot of rules, but y'all call them suggestions. I grew up in a church, but I like Santa Claus. Anybody in here like Santa Claus? Tell you what, Christmas was a good deal at my house. You wrote down or told somehow what you wanted, and all of a sudden you got that and more. So what I heard in church, not what they told me, what I heard was, if you pray for something, God will give it to you. I'm sure they did not say that, but that is what little Nelson heard. Well, I would pray for things and I wouldn't get them, and I'd think, you know what? The heck with God. But I'll take Santa Claus. And once I realized that God is not Santa Claus, I was real bummed out. So I wasn't really angry at God. I was just kind of indifferent. You know, like, all right, you do your deal and I'll do mine. If there is a God, he sure doesn't like me. I mean, look at my life. I'm 19 years old with health problems and a DWI sitting in AA meetings. You got to be kidding me. It's a death sentence, right? And then sometimes y'all are so happy and clapping. And yay, I'm so grateful to be sober. I was not grateful when I got here. You know, I mean, I was down in the Durham Central group, my first home group. It took me a while to get a sponsor and ask for help because I did not want what you had, but I did not want to drink. In that outpatient place and listening to y'all and just being around and my family, I knew I could not drink. But I certainly didn't want to work the steps. Certainly didn't want to get a sponsor. I certainly didn't want to ask for help. That feels very weak to me. That is not what they taught me in school. What I learned in school is be better than everybody. If you can make your ego the biggest, and if you can seem like you have no fear, even though you may be the most scared person in there, you can survive. That's what I brought to AA. I'm going to be a tough guy. Once again, I'm not real big, and I'm not super intelligent, but I'm quick on my feet, and I can talk a good game, you know? I think about that with alcoholics, you know? Like, I may not be the smartest, but boy, I was in this conference for work with all these people, and I was sitting around looking at them all, and they got all these degrees, and they're way more intelligent than I am. And we were in Alexandria, Virginia, and one of them was like, talking about something, and I said, you know what? I'm probably the dumbest person in this room. But if you put me over in that rough neighborhood 2 or 3 blocks, I might be the only one that can get out of there, you know? I'm quick on my feet, you know? I'm no dummy. And so I would just sit in the back of the room and leave, and I really thought if I just sat with y'all for an hour, somehow magically it's going to happen. They called on me one night at the beginners meeting at Durham Central. And I said, I'm 19 years old, and if the average life expectancy is 80, that's like 60 years of not drinking. There's no way I make it. There's no way. And I mean, I believe that. I mean, statistically, you know, if you start, you know, there wasn't really there wasn't the internet when I got sober. You didn't Google things, you know, but you start looking at stats of us, they're pretty bad. And I just, you know, I remember thinking, but, you know, there was an old timer in the back of the room that talked about living one day at a time. And here's the important part of that story for me. I felt embarrassed about what I shared at that meeting. No one made me feel embarrassed. I felt embarrassed. And I started out of that meeting, and the guy grabbed me. It's this guy named Bert. He was from Jamaica. And he sat on a picnic bench and spent his own time talking to me about how he lived one day at a time. Like, I didn't know you live one day at a time. I'm always planning, and I'm always, you know, they joke with me at work like, Nelson, what's the plan? Because they know I'm always up to something, right? Because I don't like to get in a tight space. I know I'm going to have to get out. So it was tough getting sober. You know, it was really hard for me. And when I finally got a sponsor and began to ask for help, which was so hard, that's really when the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous began to take hold in my life. And, you know, I do not consider myself a miracle. I know we say that. I don't believe that. But I do believe that AA is a miracle. I believe that my life can be an example of what a miracle can look like. Me personally, I don't feel like a miracle. I've gotten speeding tickets and let go of jobs and cussed out and all kinds of stuff. I don't think that happens to miracles. But I do believe that AA is a miracle. And once I could ask for help, I began to change. And I've learned some things. You know, I was 19 when I got here, and y'all raised me. My parents, the church I went to, the schools I went to, the teachers, A lot of them tried, well-intentioned people with good information. I couldn't hear them. I couldn't apply it. I did not believe them. They weren't like me. Not to get on a soapbox, but I worry sometimes when I sit in meetings and I'm not in any kind of fear of a non-alcoholic of any kind ending up in a meeting closed or open. I don't worry about that. That's not my fear. My fear is that person not getting the help that they need because we can't help them. My home group in Memphis, Tennessee, if someone doesn't identify as an alcoholic, a couple of people just talk to them, have a conversation. It comes from a place of love to make sure they're in the right place. It's not trying to kick someone out of the meeting or make it like, oh, there's something special going on here. Get on out of here. It's not like that. It's like, are you going to get the help that you need? AA was the first place that I remember thinking, God, I drank like that. I have felt that way. When you have that experience, oh my God, I'm just like them. If you're new and you hadn't had that experience, I pray for that for you. What that's allowed me to do is take it outside of the rooms. I'm just like my family. I'm just like the guy on the airplane next to me. I'm just like the person on television sharing that's suffering. I'm just like everybody else. I've always felt disconnected. And the thing about alcohol for me is it created this illusion of being connected. I actually felt kind of connected when I drank it first. It was an illusion, but it felt good. I don't operate on my thoughts or feelings anymore. I'm grateful for that. I learned that in AA. Do right action. I've learned a couple of things by taking the steps. I continue to take the steps. I'm one of these people, I like my grand sponsor says, we can argue about how to do the steps when we're all doing them. Good luck with that, right? So I listen. I appreciated what Roy had to say about trying to grow. I'm trying to grow here. And, so if somebody shares something in a meeting, I might try it out, like a spiritual thing or something, the way they do the step. Awesome, I'm open. That first step was hard for me. I had to ask for help. I don't like asking for help. I don't like feeling powerless. And I operate in this place that I believe I can manage my life. My life is totally unmanageable, drunk or sober. My life's not unmanageable because I drank. My life's unmanageable because I was born on January 26, 1981, and that's part of the human condition. But if I can't drink because I'm powerless and I can't not drink because my life is unmanageable, I got a real problem. And I'm grateful that in step 2, what happened for me is I've learned over the years, this is just my experience. Get your own. I mean, really, when I read the doctor's opinion, what I get out of it is the doctors could not produce the psychic change in the alcoholic, but they could tell you what they did to get theirs. I can't tell you how to get sober. I can tell you and share with you what I did to get sober, and you can do the work. One of the biggest gifts I ever had in Alcoholics Anonymous was sitting with Bill, my first sponsor, and him saying, this is your sobriety. Before I got here, I conned and manipulated every single person in my life to do things for me. I never did anything. I graduated from high school because my sister did my last paper for me. I got drunk and passed out of the computer. She finished it. She woke me up and made sure I drove and handed it in so I can graduate high school. I'd hate to sit with my dad and talk about all the finances stuff that was thrown at me and the manipulation that I did there and all the times I lied to my mother about where I was and what I was doing. All the poor girls in high school, my God. I remember doing my 8-step and Bill Tilley said, this is not a let's contact our ex-girlfriend kind of errand that we're running on here. But nobody could take these steps from me. This is my work to do. But step 2, I wanted to know, what is this God? What is this? And what I've come to find out is my biggest job with step 2 is I need to make room for God to do its work. God's got his work and I got mine. The problem is I'm always in the way. I'm always in the way. I watched this home group member of mine in Memphis, Steve Mitchell, pick up his 29-year chip, and he said, there's no ceiling on recovery. How free do you want to be? How free do you want to be? Well, you get a little bit of this thing, and we're alcoholic. I don't know about you, but I want more. It feels a heck of a lot better than it used to, so I want more. So I try to make God as big as I can make God so that whatever happens, happens. I don't like to sit and make notes of God's this and God isn't this. That's not useful for me. God's either everything or he's nothing. That's what the big book tells me. So I just try to make it really big. I get up every morning and I say the third step prayer. First time I did it, it felt so awkward. It was with these guys in Durham, and we got on our knees and held hands, and I thought, whoa, what are we doing? Stumbled into some kind of seance. It's about to get weird in here. And, I've done that every day for years. I just get on my knees and say the third step prayer. First thing, I did it this morning again. And when I'm agitated or doubtful, like it says in the book, if I can get on my knees, I will. But I can also put my head down, and wherever I am, I can talk to God. I can say the third step prayer, or I can just say, God, take this from me. During the pandemic, we were reading the stories at one of my home group, and there's a story called Our Southern Friend. Now, he was from Baltimore. As far as let me tell you something. This is true. I've got a diploma to prove it. I have a master's degree in Southern Studies from the University of Mississippi. Can't make that up. And Baltimore is not the South. But I guess to a Yankee like Bill Wilson, which bless his heart he was, Baltimore's the South. But Our Southern Friend, there's a great little passage in there where he says, God, I've made a mess of things, and I can't do anything about it. Here I am with all my troubles. Take my troubles and do what you will with me. That's kind of the essence of that third step for me. In the fourth step, I have learned how to inventory. Thank God. That has saved me over and over and over again. And I don't get into all this, well, it's not a fourth step after you've done your first, it's a 10th step. Okay, that's fine. Whatever you and your sponsor work out, great. I'll call it a 4th step. If you want me to call it a 10th step, it's a 10th step. I don't care. We're splitting hairs. If you're not putting pen to paper, what are you doing? I try to put pen to paper every single day. Am I 100% successful? No, but it doesn't matter. My intention is to do it every day. And I learned how to do it in a 4th step. I learned how to take my inventory. I learned that the problem is Nelson, and I have a part to play in every single situation. Everything. I took that 5th step with Bill on the banks of the Eno River. And driving over there, I wasn't going to tell him some of the things. I wasn't going to tell him, I'm not going to tell him that. And he shared with me some things from his 5th step. And then I was just like, blah, 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 blah. I would like to report that he fell asleep in the middle of my 5th step. Kind of hurt my ego. That's okay. Then you just go back to the 4th step, and then you're good, right? And you just do the whole process over again if you get a resentment. I heard an Al-Anon say, we're only as sick as our secrets. I try not to keep secrets. They're not useful to me. One of the greatest gifts of the spirit of the 5th step for me is living in transparency. I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not afraid with who I am. What a gift. I can go anywhere in the world. Now, there's people that do not like me. I'm okay with that. I like me. I don't know them amends. Some people we just don't G-haul with. That's okay. There's people I don't like in AA. There's people I don't like at my home group. But I tell you what, if they called me at 2 a.m., I'd help them. Doesn't mean I have to like them. That's okay. Liking and loving, 2 different things in my experience. Step 6, I had to put a lot of that stuff on paper. I had to learn to be aware of those defects of character. I felt like at first I was just doing a 7th step and I wasn't really sure what I was asking for. I just read the 12 and 12. It talks about the 7 deadly sins. I find that very useful for me. I'm not making anything up. I feel like I'm doing something that people have done for years, right? Step 7, when I get those and I start seeing, I'm feeding this sloth, I'm feeding this lust, I'm feeding this pride, I can ask God to let go of it. It helps me get grounded in what I'm actually praying. I need to put stuff down on paper so I can see it. For me, when I don't do that sometimes and it's just up here, Bill one time told me, Nelson, your mind's like a bad neighborhood. You don't need to be going there alone. And I have to put stuff on paper so I can let go of it. There's so much freedom in writing if you'll do it, if I'll do it. My 8th step, I made that list. And then step 9, I began to make amends. What a beautiful process. What an absolutely beautiful process. So many things were reconciled, Brief story, my sister went over to visit a school for her kid. And the principal's giving her a tour. She ran into him or something. And she goes, "Did you teach at Jordan High School?" He said, "I did." She goes, "You had my brother, Nelson Griffin." He goes, "Oh, yeah." I did. And this is a Montessori magnet school in Durham. She said, "Did you know he's the head of a Montessori school in Kentucky?" He went, "Wow. We have the same job. Looks a little different, same job." When I went to make amends in my high school, there were 3 people I owed amends, and that man was one of them. I went and found him in his room, and I made amends. I used to ride by that high school. I had to ride. It was like I couldn't get anywhere in Durham riding by that place. I hated that place. I made those amends, and I remember about a month later riding by and thinking, "Oh yeah, I went to high school there once upon a time." Freedom. That 10th step pays dividends for me. I continue to use it. I make a lot of mistakes. I have a bad temper and a bad mouth, and I can be quick to judge, and I've got a lot of spiritual growth to do. And that 10th step prevents me from just sitting in it, because when I sit in it, I'm totally blocked off from the Spirit. And one of the gifts is, I did my Montessori training. I'm a Montessori teacher. If you don't know what that is, it doesn't matter. You can Google it or whatever. It's child-directed education. I taught 3 to 6-year-olds, all in the same class. That's what I did. Love it. There's a chapter in one of the books that was written by our founder, Maria Montessori, called The Spiritual Preparation of the Teacher. I remember getting to that, and I ate it up. I read it to my staff all the time. Basically what she says is, before you go in your classroom, take all of your emotional baggage and leave it at the door. Don't put it on the children. Go in there and love and service and help them. When I do a 10th step, I can, when a kid, now I'm the head of the school. It's been a lot of fun the last couple of years. That's all right. I'm still doing it. I'm still in. And thanks to y'all. A lot of times I'll go home at night and I'll sit on the porch and I'll light up a cigar and I drink a Topo Chico. And I sit there and I think, I'm quitting. I'm done. I'm not going over to that place tomorrow. If I have to talk to one more of those parents, one more, and I wake up in the morning and I make my coffee and I sit there and I start to talk to God, and those thoughts are all gone and I just do it. I learned that from y'all. I was told you never miss your home group. Never miss your home group. So if I was in town, unless, I just never miss my home group, I don't miss my home group. I still don't miss my home group. I've learned in the 11th step how to really, this is my own experience. Once again, go get yours. I've learned so much in AA, but I have had to seek outside. The book tells me, be quick to see where religious people are right. Make use of what they offer. I've had my hang-ups with religion, sure. But I also have tried a whole bunch of them. Now, when I say tried, I didn't join and give money, but I've read what they had to say. And I've done lots of meditation in different traditions. It all has kind of led me back to the 12 steps. They're really not doing anything different in those other rooms than we're trying to do here. The difference is I don't connect with them like I connect with y'all. I don't feel like I need them like I need you. But I'm willing to try, and I have developed, and I go through phases, but I try to get up and meditate for anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes every morning. And if I can do it at night, I'll do some at night. That's like gravy. I feel so much closer to the Spirit. The last 3 years have been some of the hardest 3 years of my sobriety. I took this job in Kentucky. I moved up there. I was married. As soon as I moved, she's like, I'm done. I'm out. That wasn't in the cards. That's not supposed to happen. I get up there, we sign divorce papers, and all of a sudden there's a pandemic. March 13th, 2000, they closed the schools. They closed every AA meeting in Lexington, Kentucky. I'm divorced. I walked into my apartment. I remember laying on the floor for 20 minutes and just bawling. I've lost my school. I've lost my AA. I've lost my marriage. I'm living in this dumpy apartment. Felt horrible. I made a phone call to some people. And they said, don't quit, don't give up. So I just kept going. I've just been going ever since. It's been hard. It's been hard to run a school during a pandemic. Everybody's got an outside issue opinion on something or another. All of a sudden, everybody's a hack public health expert. And then they're asking me questions. And I'm like, I ain't been to the doctor in years. I give up, Just do what the health department tells you. I don't know. Told you I don't like rules, I mean, all of a sudden I'm in charge of enforcing the rules. Whew, that's dangerous. So, we've just done it, and we just lost about a third of our staff at the end of this school year. It's been the hardest school year ever. I'm going back for more. I mean, the divorce really hurt. It hurt. That wasn't supposed to happen. I remember too, talking to my sponsor about it. He said, yeah, everybody, the divorce rate's 50%. It's not like it's any different in AA, I felt so ashamed among y'all. Y'all were the ones that were the hardest to look in the eye about that. Felt like I had let y'all down. And I'm grateful for those of you that had been through that shared your experience. I never thought about drinking. I never thought about eating a bullet. I think the last thing, the 12th step has been, what a gift. I've had an absolute privilege to sponsor a lot of guys. This suit that I'm wearing, my friend Aiden that I was friends with when I was in college, not an alcoholic to my knowledge, called me up. He was living in Bloomington, Indiana, and trying to get sober. And I was living in Memphis at the time, and we'd talk back and forth on the phone, and we had a plan to meet. Got a text one day from his girlfriend, his partner. He drank himself to death. 39 years old. And I went to Bloomington, Indiana, and his partner, she said, I've got all these clothes and they'll fit you. And I just thought, whatever, I'll take the clothes, I felt weird, actually, very strange, but I walked in and he had been dead for 10 months and she had not touched anything in the house. In 2016, I lost one of my sponsees in Atlanta. He died of an alcohol-induced seizure. In October of 2018, one of my sponsees that I was so close with. Any chronic relapsers in here? I'm not, but this guy approached me. He was a chronic relapser. Couldn't get sober. Came up to me at my home group one night in Memphis in the parking lot. You're going to be my sponsor. I said, I'm not sponsoring you. What do you mean? I said, why do you think that I need to be your sponsor, David? He said, you're the guy. You're the guy that can do it. I said, call me tomorrow. I didn't think anything of it. Well, he called me, so we met for coffee. And I found myself, and maybe you've had this experience when you sponsor people, saying things that you don't know, that you don't even necessarily believe in, right? But it sounds good. I'm sitting across from him. He was a big guy, older than me. And I said, listen, if we're going to do this, you're going to do exactly what I say when I say it, no questions asked. And he looked at me and he said, okay. And we began to walk. And he stayed sober for 6 months. And then he relapsed. And I thought, well, that's the end of that. He came back and he got 3 years sober. And he became a huge part of my life. I was leaving work one day and something was off with him. My wife called me. She said, David's left a suicide note on our door. I drove to his apartment with one of my other sponsees. I couldn't get in his apartment. We called the police, and as I'm waiting for the police, David drives up. He was still alive. And Warren jumped in front of his car, and he hit Warren with his car, and he drove off. And we're waiting for the police, and they said there was nothing they could do. About 30 minutes later, we see an ambulance coming down the road. David had shot himself right around the corner. I mean, I couldn't stop it. He was admitted to the ER, and they were able to stabilize him, but because none of us were family, even though we know we are, we couldn't go see him. I'm standing in the hall of the Med, which in Memphis is a dangerous hospital, just so you know. It's in downtown Memphis. It is not a place you ever want to be. And I'm standing there with my head in my hands, and this guy walks up. He says, "Mr. Nelson?" I looked at him. I said, "Johnny, how are you?" He said, I'm the ER trauma surgeon tonight. What can I do for you?" He was one of the parents at my school. I said, "My friend's in there." He said, "Wait here an hour. It's going to take me an hour. Wait here." He came back. He said, "I can't tell you anything because of HIPAA. Don't leave." So I went to David's apartment. I took a nap on his couch, and I drove over there and met his sister. There was nothing they could do to stabilize him or keep him stable. I mean, he wouldn't have lived and if they pulled the plug. And he didn't have a will. You know how we are. His sister looked at me and she said, "Nelson, what do you think David would want?" I said, "I think David would want us to pull the plug and say a prayer." So the nurse unhooked him. And he lived about 5 hours until he passed. The night before, all the guys that I sponsored and their spouses, we got together at David's apartment with his brother and his sister. And his sister said, "These were the best 3 years of David's life. Thank you for giving him that. I'm sorry he couldn't make it." There's an old timer at my home group named Ralph. And Ralph said, "I've been in AA for 34 years, Nelson. I've never seen a group of guys rally around each other like this. Hold on to this." I tell you what, I've been through some tough times. That's about the darkest day I've had. Maybe something else will happen. I don't know. I don't have a crystal ball. I feel like if I can walk through that, I can walk through anything. It's one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. One of the blessings of that was he sponsored this old guy named Linnell in Memphis. Linnell lived on the streets for 20 years. If you know anything about Memphis, Tennessee, it is a dangerous place to be. And it is hot, and there are some of the biggest doggone mosquitoes you have ever seen in your life, and they will eat you alive. 20 years on the streets of Memphis is like an eternity. And Linnell got sober, and David was his sponsor. And Linnell and I were standing at our home group, and I said, "Linnell, what are you going to do for a sponsor?" And he looked at me and said, "You, grand sponsor, you're it." Now, Linnell's parents had passed away before he got sober. When it came time to make amends, Linnell said, "They're buried somewhere in South Memphis." I said, "Where?" He said, "I don't know." I said, "What do you mean you don't know?" He goes, "I haven't been there sober. I don't know." It took us a while, but we figured out the cemetery, and Linnell and I went there. And we located his parents' grave, and he wrote him a letter. Now, Linnell had a horrible stutter. He's basically, he reads really well. Oh, is that my time? Oh, I'm about over. Thank you, whoever that was. Thank you for not turning off your cell phone. But Linnell and I stood on a hot June, and I said, "Linnell, you want to read the letter privately or with you?" He said, "I want you standing right here beside me." Thank you for that. I love my home group. I think on the books I have the most sobriety, which is scary. Sometimes I sit in there and I have more sobriety than everybody combined. I have learned to try to be the elder statesman. They make horrible decisions and I just sit there and smile. Can't wait to see how this turns out. The last thing I just want to share is that, I was moving the stuff out of my ex-wife's house in the middle of the pandemic, and I went over and had dinner with a friend of a friend in AA that I'd met in AA, this lady. And we just clicked. And she's been to some Al-Anon. And we've been doing this long-distance relationship now for 2 years. She lives in Memphis, I live in Lexington, Kentucky. It's not easy. But we pray together over the phone and over FaceTime, and we Zoom, and we do all this spiritual stuff, and we have this deep spiritual connection that I've never had. And I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. Maybe we ride off in the sunset. Maybe she calls me after this and goes, that AA stuff's kind of weird. I'm out. I'm okay with whatever happens, no matter what. I've learned over the last couple of years, just be present for the moment. I wish I could sit here and tell you about all the kids I've worked with. My God, I hated school, and now I'm the head of a school. It's crazy. Mr. Nelson, everywhere I go, I just get to be around children. They're so much more spiritual than I'll ever be. I'm trying to get back to that. I'm trying to constantly learn from them, you know? So anyway, I think I'm done. I've gone over my time. I'm so grateful. I absolutely love the state of North Carolina. Thank you for my homecoming. Thank you for welcoming me back. Thank you for my sobriety.